Happy to be here with you all this week. I'm Ashley M. Coleman, your host, and excited to dig into these publishing streets with you all again for another week. Remember, a little housekeeping before we start. Permission to Write is a membership community for Black and POC writers. Here, we believe in community and accountability over competition. So if you're looking for a space to cultivate your craft, definitely head to permissiontowrite.com to learn more about all that we do. So remember, you can sit with us and we'd be happy to have you as a part of our community. If you have been a faithful listener of this podcast, I have to ask that you take a moment to hit the subscribe button, leave a review, or like this podcast. Listen, we have dreams of paying our current editor, hiring an additional producer, and getting some funding up in this piece. And you can help us do that for free by just telling people how much you enjoy listening to me rant about publishing for 15 to 20 minutes each week. Greatly appreciate it. Lastly, I just want to give a heads up that we're pivoting to bi-weekly shows. This is a two-man operation at this point, so shout out to our wonderful editor/producer Dilemma, and it will probably give me less gray hair if I have 2 weeks to prepare these all for you. Especially with adding the video component, it'll be helpful. So remember, you can watch the video on our YouTube channel. Same great content, just every 2 weeks. So let's jump into the show. This is the Permission to Write podcast, and I'm your host, Ashley M. Coleman, author of Good Morning Love. Join us each week as writers discuss more than writing. You'll hear from me as well as the occasional guest on craft, publishing, life, and culture. We hope you enjoy the show. Hey everybody, I missed you guys. I celebrated my birthday last week, so we didn't have a show, but very excited to bring you a new episode today. So jumping into this week in publishing, HarperCollins Children's Books has partnered with Girl Scouts of the USA for an 8-book publishing program, with the first title to launch this fall. Plans include both fiction and nonfiction with a focus on themes such as friendship, leadership, taking action, and making the world a better place. All core areas of the Girl Scouts organization. Moving on, we have to support our small presses. So that especially the ones that were affected by the March closure of small press distribution. 385 indie publishers were affected by this closure and will need all the love to recover their unsold books and settle owed payments to authors. So definitely make sure you find out about those. We'll link to the articles so that you can take a look at some of those indie presses and buy those books so that you can support those institutions staying up. And then last but not least, author and Nobel Prize winner Alice Munro has passed away. Upon news of Munro's death, Kristen Cochrane, CEO of Penguin Random House Canada, Munro's longtime publisher, said in a statement, Alice Munro is a national treasure, a writer of enormous depth, empathy, and humanity whose work is read, admired, and cherished by readers throughout Canada and around the world. Alice's writing inspired countless writers too, and her work leaves an indelible mark on our literary landscape. So definitely rest well to Alice Munro. Jumping into this week's Given the Option. So this is our segment where we cast one of our favorite books that we've read, and we want to cover Love Radio by Ebony Liddell. Yes, I still read YA books, okay? For all the Black girls that didn't have real YA books that represented us when we were growing up, I still like to dabble in the YA genre. We were also somewhat of label mates during the summer of 2022. I like to call it that. We both released our books that year, and we also are on the same imprint. So our books got packaged a lot together. And so I definitely read all of my fellow colleagues' books, especially those of us who were being promoted together on the summer. I think it was the summer of Black love for 2022. So yes, Love Radio is an amazing book, and it's all about two teenagers in Detroit, which I think is fair to say that they have old souls. I mean, they're referencing all my favorite Black love stories, so I think I can say that that's the case. Prince is a DJ he's doling out romantic advice and swooning over Danielle Ford, who gives him 3 dates to prove that she should go out with him. So to jump in, I would cast Lyric Ross as Danny. If you're unfamiliar, this young lady stole every scene in This Is Us, okay? Everyone that she was in. And watching her opposite Sterling K. Brown was masterful each time. I think she has the right amount of sugar and spice to play this role and would absolutely enjoy seeing her on screen in something like this, especially in a leading role. For Prince, I'm thinking smooth enough, but in that innocent way still, which is just not an easy thing to come by in today's time. I feel like all the kids are so grown now. But I was thinking maybe Diamond Lyons, who actually plays on The Upshaws, if you're familiar, the show on Netflix. And he's actually a young person still. You know, a lot of times there's like 30-year-olds playing teenagers, but he's still actually really young, which this book gave me that vibe of just that great young energy. But I could see him. He's like a little silly and goofy on The Upshaws, but I definitely feel like I could see him getting into his little smooth bag to play this young DJ swooning over Danielle. For the parents, before I get to the parents, I want to talk about her friends. So I throw in Iris Baker, who is also on This Is Us for Rashida. So she was the eldest daughter of Sterling K. Brown. And oh my gosh, I'm losing the name of the wonderful actress that plays his wife, but y'all know her. She was amazing. And I also like for Rashida, maybe Daria Johns. Oh, sorry. And then Iris Baker was for Rashida. I'm sorry. And then Daria Johns for SB, who are 2 of Danielle's friends in the book. For the parents, I love a good Black couple on screen. So if the dad from BMF wasn't so trash in the show, I would maybe say Russell Hornsby, but I can't stand him in that show, so it's very hard for me to want to cast him in this. He's probably also maybe a little bit older than Danielle's parents would actually be. But I'm thinking maybe like Corey Hardrick, you know, folks more in that youthful thing, but can definitely have teenage kids because, you know, clearly they have children. And then for the mama, let's see, it says that her and Danny look alike. So I'm thinking Sakan Simblo or Gabrielle Dennis, I think could be really fun in a role like that. Maybe even Tabitha Brown. That might be fun because, you know, we all love some Tab. And it's been exciting to see her popping up in more acting roles. She's been on The Shy. She's been on The Upshaws. So I want to see her in more roles. So I could totally see her playing this kind of cool down Detroit mom. And last but not least, my question for you all is who you would cast for the little hot in the pants Destiny. So Destiny is the friend that, of course, we get introduced to in the beginning of the book, but we understand that Danielle is avoiding her. And throughout the story, what happened between them kind of unfolds. So that one was a little tricky for me, but I want to hear from you. Who would you cast in the role of Destiny from Love Radio by Ebony Liddell? So that's our fun casting for the week. Without further ado, we will jump into our actual topic for the show. So this week, I wanted to talk about what happens when your agent says yes. You know, after the query letter that you write, so a query is that letter that you're writing to potential agents to see if they might be interested in this project that you've written. And for this week, we're actually going to focus on fiction just because the nonfiction process is a little bit different. It's all about writing a book proposal, and we may have some people to come on and talk about that at another time. But for this particular discussion, we're really honing in on fiction, which means that you already have to have a whole project done before you're actually going out to agents. So I feel like there is so much information out there on how to write a query. You know, we live in an information age, so that's not as hard to find. But there's not as much about what happens once you actually have an agent that's interested in your work. I mean, that is the real goal of what we're trying to do here, right? So we want to eventually land that agent. Back in Philadelphia, Eric Smith used to host these amazing brain pick sessions where he would invite a guest to chat about all facets of publishing. And I was so thrilled to see that an agent and writer of Eric's caliber had moved to Philadelphia. And Anne was offering so much information that I really needed at the time. I was in the thick of the throes of trying to figure out how to actually get my book published. It was perfect timing. So I will be singing Eric Smith's praises for till the end of time because I feel like I got so much valuable information from him at that time, and he didn't have to do that. So I remember being in one of those sessions and wondering what the heck happens once someone actually responds. And thankfully, I got my answer, and it's only right to share it with all of you now that I've officially been through that process. After you get your whole life together, when you finally see an email that doesn't start with, "We regret to inform you," you'll likely need to send additional pages. Most agents only ask for 5 to 10 pages initially, if they ask for any pages at all. Some agents only ask for the query. Some agents ask for a query in 5 to 10 sample pages. It all varies depending on the person. So the next note would be a request for more pages. Sometimes someone might now ask for 50 pages, or they might request your full manuscript if they're really interested. Of course, then you jump into another game of hurry up and wait. But if an agent is serious about you, they will make haste essentially to jump into your manuscript to see if it's something that they actually want to represent. Every single agent is different and may require a different amount of time to get back to you. But when they do, and they're still interested in your project, they'll want to chat with you. Yes, on the telephone, which I know is a very foreign concept in today's time. We like to get a lot of business done through email and text messages, but you cannot avoid the need to actually talk to someone, get a feel for their actual energy. This is your career, and you want to make sure that you get a real feel for the person on the other end of that computer screen. Once you've scheduled your time to chat, it's all about preparation for your discussion. Listen, after a whole year of vague disinterest or no responses at all, the moment someone said they loved the book, my whole brain almost exploded. I think I yelled really loudly in a public setting, right? When I finally had someone who was interested in my book. I would say that you should write some notes before your call. I don't know about you, but I get a little bit nervous on calls. So making sure that I was properly prepared was the key to ensuring that I actually got all my questions answered and that all the emotions didn't really cloud my judgment. And being prepared is a great way to do that. So some things that you should really consider in this chat, I want to just claim here, do a disclaimer here that this is not an exhaustive list, right? There are other questions that you might want to ask. However, these are some questions that are a starting point and could be advantageous to you to use when you're actually on the phone with your agent. Starting with, what stood out to you about the book? This question should help you clarify if you and your agent have the same vision for the book. Every manuscript needs work, but most are not turned in publishing ready. There's typically something that you have to massage a little bit, unless you're just a phenomenal writer, which you might be. But those of us specifically as a debut author, I can only speak to that experience so far, the book needed a little bit of work. But make sure you balance what's most important to you about the book and what can be changed or improved upon. The next question I have here is, do you have any additional feedback? And how close do you think the book is to being submission ready? If there's a part of the book that you love and they want to strike it, well, you may not really be on the same page or have the same vision about the book. And you'll want to be able to manage your expectations for how quickly you hope to see the book into the world. I mean, I got to tell you, a lot of people, it takes at least 2 years for a book to actually show up on a shelf, but I'm sure there are varying timelines on that. You may end up working on your manuscript for like a whole nother year with your agent before you're even ready to go out on submission. Again, results may vary, right? But you just have to be open to the process and whatever might be most conducive to your actual manuscript. Another question you might want to consider is, do you already have editors in mind that you think would be interested in this story? Do you share your list with writers? And am I able to contribute to that list? Again, making sure that you're in alignment. Do their choices for editors make sense? And it doesn't hurt to be doing your own research on those editors and imprints so that you can get an idea of that alignment. Most recently, when my agent sent me a list of editors, it all made sense to me based on the project. So some of the editors I was familiar with, some I was not. I took the time to research them. Google is free. You can find out a lot about people, what their wish lists are, and everything made a lot of sense based on the type of story I was trying to tell. I've seen some writers say that an agent was taken aback when they asked this question about their list of editors, but totally not a weird question. And something that they typically should have started mulling over already before you had your call. So we'll talk a little bit about agents being strange, but these should all be questions that an actual experienced agent would be used to hearing and hopefully would not actually be offended by. Then, this is important. What is your communication style? Email, text, carrier pigeon, whatever it is. You want to know how your agent likes to communicate best and then make sure that their method of communication is in alignment with how you like to receive information. Do they reach out about every interaction? Or do they save the good news for you? I know a lot of us as authors, we really don't want to hear about the no's as much as we just kind of want to hear about the people who are actually interested in the story. But if you're a person who wants to know everything, then you should find an agent that is willing to give you that information. And, you also just don't want to have to wait weeks and weeks for a response. We get it. Everybody's busy. Agents have a lot of clients. They have a lot of things that they're doing, but you do want to feel like you're a priority to your agent. So just making sure that there's some type of conversation around how often you communicate and like whether you can have some casual interactions. I really love the fact that I can text my agent. I think that feels like it's more of a personal relationship than only being able to email them. The next question I have here to consider on a call with your potential agent is, what happens if my book doesn't sell? Hopefully you have an agent that's actually in it for the long run with you. But the reality is that, they're kind of signing up for that particular project. And then you can talk about if they really see this as a long-term career commitment for you as a writer. If that isn't the case, though, and they're really only interested in this project and selling particularly, it'll just be good to know that up front versus getting through the process and then they dump you because it didn't sell. And, it also can be helpful to find out from that question, what is going to be the plan if the book doesn't sell? Which publishing doesn't have any guarantees. So I recommend that you fortify yourselves for the idea of if your book doesn't sell. Will you revise and submit it and resubmit, or will you move on to the next thing, or will, there be a dissolving of your contract with your agent? Just good to know. Next question is, do you work with authors who write in multiple genres? I know me personally as a writer, I have myriad interests in things that I want to write. And although my first project was women's fiction turned romance, I know that I have interest in things outside of being a romance maven. That's not necessarily it wasn't necessarily my intended field in the beginning, but I do love stories. Just kind of how they show up, I feel like might vary for me. And I know that my agent knows that I have these different interests and we'll figure it out if and when the time comes, or if I decide that I want to write a nonfiction book. I've been having ideas for books of essays and anthologies and things like that. she may or may not be the person to actually represent those ideas because she kind of signed up to represent me for fiction. So these are discussions that you'll either have at the beginning, at least the agent will know. And then when the time comes, you might be able to work on what makes sense, and you might have multiple agents for multiple different projects. Last but not least here is, would I be able to chat with any other authors on your list? And I know this sounds like a very forward question, but I will say that I have talked to other potential clients of my agent, and it's not weird at all. I loved talking to them because I actually do enjoy my relationship with my agent. So it was fine for me to just give a few minutes of my time to chat with them about what the experience was like working with my agent. So everyone is putting their best foot forward on this type of call. The agent wants to work with you. You want to work with the agent. So everything's going to sound really peachy and great. But you really can go to the source, go to other clients that can help you with your decision. And you want to be respectful of their time, keep it very professional, and get a gauge of what it's like working with that agent. Now, after you've had that great conversation, you ask some of these questions and maybe some that you've added from your own thoughts as well, you may have other agents that have gotten back to you, and you'll have to let them know that that you have an offer on the table. Typically, the rule of thumb is that you can give them 2 to 4 weeks to read through your manuscript to determine if they're also interested in offering you representation. Then you're in a full-on dating scenario, right? Like you are trying to figure out what is going to be the best person or who is going to be the best person for you to go with. It's important to remember that this person is going to be your partner in your writing career. You don't have to make a decision in haste. You should take your time, make sure all your questions have been answered, and that you're most comfortable with the decision that you're making. It's very exciting. It's easy just to want to make a rash decision. But I've heard a lot of people say that sometimes having the wrong agent can be worse than not having an agent at all. I always share the example that I had another agent who had my full manuscript at the time that I was offered full representation by my current agent. Well, I got back to that other agent, letting them know that I had an offer and the time frame that I needed them to read. And when the time was up, I think I ended up at another brain pick down at Indie Hall with Eric Smith. And I asked him what he thought. When the time was up, they still hadn't gotten back to me. And Eric pretty much gave me some great advice. I asked him, should I give the agent more time? They were a larger agency, probably a little bit more well-known. And he said, go with who is most excited about your book. I really took that to heart because I had this amazing call with an agent that really thought that the book was great. And there was another agent who was telling me they were interested, but they weren't getting around to reading the full manuscript. So if that agent couldn't take the time to read with an offer on the table, it made me question what the rest of our relationship would be like. I would be the newbie on her list who may not have gotten any of the attention needed to usher a book into the world. So these are the things that are sometimes left unsaid when we talk about how to really navigate the waters of publishing, specifically as Black and POC writers who don't always have access to the same information. Once you decide, you'll of course let your other agents off gently. Confirm with your agent of interest and then embark on signing your contract, which is typically for a year with an automatic renewal until you or your agent decide that you no longer want to work together, which hopefully is not the case, and you and your agent ride off into the literary sunset of success, bestsellers, and book awards. Remember what we talked about last time, you're in charge. So while it's very flattering that someone finally said yes, that you get that little piece of validation so valiantly fought for, you still need to make the best decision for yourself and for your career. A couple notes that I would be remiss not to make are, Make sure that you research the agency that your agent represents. I always say Google is free, people, and you can find a lot of information there. And hopefully you have a network like the Permission to Write community where you can ask other people if they're familiar with the agent. I definitely asked Eric Smith if he had ever heard of my agent or my agency at the time. And he did, thankfully. An agent should also never be asking you for money to represent you. They will make their money when the book sells. So that is fishy. If an agent is somehow giving you a price for representation, doesn't make sense. They take a commission off of your advance and also off of your sales. That is how an agent should be making their money. If an agent is pressuring you to sign with them quickly or pushing back on many of these questions that you've asked them, it's probably safe to say that you should go with someone else. Agents should be understanding that you're an author. You know, you may either be a new author or you might be a published author looking for a new agent. They should understand that you have important questions about your career and never actually be questioning respectful, professional questions that make a lot of sense for a person who's going to be able to speak and do business on your behalf. So that's the episode for this week. And I will leave you with this awesome quote from Jason Reynolds recently at the Quelle's Color of Children's Literature Conference. I just love it. I love this quote because we're always in our own way about just getting our words on the page. So I thought this was a really funny pull from the conversation that clearly Jason was a panelist on. And he said, "I don't have any fear of writing badly because it is guaranteed. What you worried about? All your OGs, all your heroes, ain't none of us ever seen Tony's first drafts." And he's referring to Toni Morrison, which is true indeed. We see these wonderful books and how they come out into the world, but everybody gets edited. Everybody has a first draft that's probably trash. I mean, there might be varying levels of trash, but we're all starting somewhere and then finishing, revising, editing to get that finished product. So that's all I got for y'all. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you all next time. Thank you for listening to the Permission to Write podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. Plug into our community that works to cultivate and amplify the voices of Black writers and writers of color by visiting permissiontowrite.com. We'll see you next time.